All right. Well, we're News Talk. Brandon Jones, Robert Harriman.
Hi.
And we will continue with some George Floyd conversation in a way. But more importantly, we'll talk about the racism allegations and the systemic problem of racism that we have in our country. And I wanted to get to two things that have surfaced that are just kind of extreme. I was happy to know that you hadn't seen these, so I can see your reaction, because it's probably how some people might have a name from our past. Back to the Obama years from the administration. He's one of the czars.
One of the many czars.
He's one of the czars, Van Jones.
Okay.
Now a CNN analyst. He is discussing the racism in white people. And he says, it is not the racist white person who is in the Ku Klux Klan that we have to worry about. It's the white liberal Hillary Clinton supporter walking her dog in Central Park who would tell you right now, people like, oh, I don't see race. Race is no big deal to me. I see us all as the same. I give to charities. But the minute she sees a black man who does not respect or who she has a slight thought against, she weaponizes race like she had been trained to do by the Aryan nation. A Klan member could have not have been a better trained to pick up the phone and tell police, it's a black man, African-American man, come get him. Here's the home run. So even the most liberal, well-intentioned white person has a virus in his or her brain that can be activated in an instant. How you feel about that? Do you have a virus in there that you can be activated in an instant? Be trained by as though you were trained by the Aryan nation itself.
Well, let me say, based on what you just read,
yes,
some of the stuff early on in those paragraphs, I don't think Van Jones was that far off.
She's talking about Karens, right? Isn't that kind of like the definition of this new Karen thing that everyone's talking about? The white, liberal, leftist woman with the bob cut who wants to throw antics and be offended at something for everyone else's. And, she wants to just prove that she's woke enough, right? She wants to, virtue signal. And
I mean, he gets a little wacky toward the end, but I think the first paragraph or so, he's not that far off.
And we saw this, right? We saw this, the sports announcer, his last name is Palmer, right? So it was go riot, go pillage, and then it was at his house, they're climbing the gate, and he's calling the cops, and he's been called out for the hypocrisy of all that. And it was like, wow.
Well, I did see a story of a progressive type newspaper, I can't remember what city it was in, and they were all promoting the rioting and all that, and then all of a sudden the rioting came to their
Oh, right. It's California. Yeah, she's in the basement. She had to hide in the basement as they pillaged the newsroom, basically, of this small sort of, I guess, internet-based progressive news outlet. Kind of, think of it as like a startup version of Young Turks.
Yeah.
And this woman was basically running it or whatever.
A handful of employees.
Yeah, like maybe 5 or 7 people, and she has to, and she could not believe that they were coming for her. And this is a story we're hearing a lot, right?
Well, I guess they think they're immune.
Yeah.
Well,
right.
No.
Do you think that all right, let me say it this way. Do you think that the desire to be woke enough and all of that, is there anything on the right that's an equivalent to that? Like the fit in kind of thing? Because I think on the right, it's not like that really.
No, not to any measurable degree, no.
Yeah. Like the black... What's it called? Yesterday or the other day, they had the Blackout Tuesday, where I put up little black boxes on their Facebook and Instagrams to prove that they're. Oh yeah, so you went. So there were certain shows that didn't air. There's a sports show that my sons turned me on to. They didn't air on Tuesday. I didn't know why. The next day they tell you, and they basically just had a blackout day to prove that you were somehow woke enough or whatever. And I know. So that's my thing. It's like I don't know that you need to show your credentials, but this is what we've seen over and over and over again, right? You do something, they find it offensive. So for instance, Jimmy Fallon recently, right? So Jimmy Fallon had done a blackface sketch, and that's offensive. Like if you've ever done a blackface sketch, if you've ever dressed up like a black person for Halloween and you're not a Democrat, suddenly that you have to apologize. Go to the altar of social justice and make penance, right? So Jimmy Fallon had to do this apology.
But you said if you're not a Democrat.
Yeah, what's a Governor George, because he's the exception to that rule, I guess. George Northern, Ralph Northern,
Virginia,
Ralph Northern, yeah.
Okay.
But all the rest of these,
but Jimmy Fallon's a Democrat,
right? So now they're coming for them too. Like we gave Ralph Northern a pass, but now we're not. So
No,
it's just interesting to see how it's spiraling out of control.
Well, I think you see that with a lot of liberalism ideas. They end up making all these policies, for a lack of a better word, and they end up eating their own. It happens all the time. I mean, look at Joe Biden right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's it's kind of an interesting thing for him. It's somehow we're still stuck with Joe. Like they haven't figured out how to kind of figure that out.
But the thing with the females, what's it called? Me Too and all that. Doesn't apply. I mean, but it always happens though. They always end up eating their own because they take everything so far.
Yeah.
It's eventually going to come around.
So the other crazy sort of connection I was going to throw your way, I thought this was very, very strange. When we read from this story, this is a public news source, Reverend Allison Cornish. And I saw that. I was like, huh? Anyway, she's the executive director of the Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light, discussing the long history of systemic racism. We know people with fewer resources and less power and who are more oppressed are going to be people deeply affected by climate. So she's about to connect George Floyd to racism to climate change. I think I got you a copy of some of the hot points here.
Yeah.
And that there's a challenge to confront racism and climate change. They are not separate issues. It's related to the crisis and must be dealt with as a whole to save the planet and each other. So she goes on and she says, quote, "We come together because we feel stronger in numbers and in voice. And if we set aside some of the ways in which we differ and find ways in which we agree, because we all know that our Earth is in peril." And she notes later on, she says, "We help people track the issues at the state and federal level that will help transition us in a just way to a new energy future." So there you have it, folks. George Floyd's death can be exploited and used as a mechanism for us all to deal with climate change. So,
yeah. Well, when I first looked at this article, and that is essentially the whole article. It's very, very short. It's a handful of paragraphs. And this Reverend Cornish didn't really explain any of her points at all. Nope. So I was at total loss. I didn't know what am I to do with
Well,
this.
let me ask you, have you heard any leftists, and I'll say liberal, just to give them a little bit of a bigger tent, give you any solutions for climate change? I've never heard anyone say this is what we want to do, other than like ban nuclear power.
Well, their solutions are stuff like the Green New Deal, stuff that's just not real.
But I meant, well, okay. I mean, yeah, okay.
That's their solution is
ban airplanes.
Yeah. Do all kinds of, get rid of the combustion engine. I mean, that's just silliness.
Yeah, it's like third world Stone Age type stuff.
We'll turn into Kenya, right?
Right. But there's no like real, I guess, economically viable ways of dealing with climate change. And even if we do some of the things they do, a lot of the data that comes out of the IPCC and whatever talk about 1 or 2 degrees at the most, and that is really, really an ambitious number.
Yeah. But I do want to go back to the article real quick, because when you sent this to me, I'm like, what am I going to say? I have no idea. Right. I did go online, look for things that were discussing this type of issue, and they were all articles that were pro this view. So this is a view that's out there.
Sure. I've heard it before.
This is not brand new, right?
I've heard it before. Yeah, Africa. No. It's part of the reason that Africa is so endangered because we're so racist. They're going to be, devastated by climate change.
But I was more interested in how that's applicable to the United States. So I do work with some people that have a different viewpoint than me, but we have very good discussions.
Okay.
So I did approach a couple of them, and they both kind of came up with the same thing. One said this off the top of their head, and the connection is there's systemic racism from years and years ago, which is affected generational wealth. So when you do have a climate change event like Katrina, these people don't have that generational wealth where they can rebuild easily or move or do things very easily that people that do have generational wealth can. So that was kind of, they really can't pick themselves back up off their feet after a climatic event. And Katrina was the example I was cited. And then I had another person who sent me a whole email about it.
Okay.
Yeah. And she went over a lot of different things that didn't really apply too much to this, but said we already discussed that climate change creates extreme weather. Extreme weather displaces people and those who are lower SES
Like social classes?
or economics, right?
Right.
Social economic classes may not be able to evacuate as easily. They also do not recover as easily. So that's the main.
Okay.
Those are the answers that kind of jived with each other because I asked them both
Right.
individually. I still don't find a connection. I don't find a connection. Yeah.
I mean, I think I understand if you truly believe that climate change is coming, it's going to create these different issues. You're going to see the need to move away from, let's say, shorelines or where food can be more plentifully or be grown, that you may be much more economically limited to make those transitions. I mean, you're less likely to handle increases in your electric bill.
But it's under racism.
Well,
now, if you go by their definition of systemic racism,
because it's built into the system, right? So
Yeah.
that's why we have more. There's a cause and effect perspective that I think the right and the left don't share, right? We see, more poverty among, they use this, black and brown people. So therefore, it's a systemic problem. Everything comes back to that systemic problem, right? So that's the core of it, and it's almost like a there has to be a certain religious belief to get there because the stats don't show that out in every single capacity. You find it in sort of the way they look at it would be, because you have this many poor people, they're going to be less likely to handle any change, especially climate change. So we see it with hurricanes, right? They're less likely to be able to move to a motel that's further away out of the path of a hurricane, those kinds of things. So that's what they're basically trying to connect. That's
Right.
kind of the long connection of dots.
right? But that poverty doesn't necessarily equate to racism either, though.
But it's because they believe that because the
Yeah.
system is racist, that's why so many more of these people that are poor are black or brown, use their phraseology.
And it was interesting that one of the guys I talked to about this, I was like, wow, how'd you really pull that off the top of your head so quickly, And I was like, oh, that's all they talked about in college.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
So that's where
Education system, huh?
that's where he got it from. Yeah.
I did not know that either.
Yeah.
All right.
So. Yeah.
All right, well, some different topics and perspectives of the wake of the George Floyd death and the tragic situation going on, connecting racism to a virus in our head and to climate change. So hang with us as we try to dive a little deeper into a few other topics.